Debbie Tuma. I'm here today with Joan Lycke of Montauk. She's the owner of the Montauk Laundromat, president of the Montauk Library Board of Trustees, and past president of the Montauk Playhouse Community Center Foundation. We're doing an oral history for the Montauk Library. And Joan, you've done so much in your life in Montauk, and you were born. Tell us where you were born and what year.
I was born in August 18th, 1937 in the South Bronx. We started summering here in Montauk, as the family said, after the war, around 1947. I was 10 years old. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
And what are their names?
Kathleen, John, Francie, and Ellen.
Okay, and your parents' names?
Frank and Mary McLaughlin.
Okay, so you were summering in Ditch Plains back in the 40s and 50s with your family. Tell us what that was like.
Well, it was absolutely magical. We came right after school closed, and like all the summer people here now, left Labor Day, and everybody went back to school. But we stayed each and every day at Ditch Plains Beach, which has become infamous today, but then the Coast Guard station, United States Coast Guard station, was at the end of the street. We walked through the station to get to the beach, and my mom and her sister, my 2 aunts, there were like 13 kids all in total, and we were here through the week, and then my uncles and dad came on the weekend. Today we call them weekend warriors, but in those days, I don't think we had that title. The big thing about that when the men came on the weekend was they would take us to East Hampton, the kids all in the back of a pickup, to go to the A&P to shop. And everybody yelled from the minute they got in it, "Old road, old road, old road." They had all hills and dales, and it was like a Ferris wheel type of thing.
Wow.
So it was magical, and that sticks in my mind when we were very young. And we were on the beach every day. You kind of lived almost in bare feet and bathing suits. And I can remember coming back to the Bronx when school started, and in those days, the late 40s and 50s, every time I heard a horn beep, I would jump, because we were void of it here, just from Mother Nature in Montauk.
So it changed you in some way, right? Being out here.
It made me love nature and absolutely love Montauk, and that's to today, you know. And there's a major thing in giving back, because we were fortunate enough to leave the Bronx, and in honesty, in 1953, my family, minus my aunts and uncles that just used to come for the summer, moved into Montauk year-round. And my dad had said he was a plumber, he would winterize the house, and we would try it for 1 year. And we've been here ever since.
So did your house have like electricity, and did it have like running water, all kinds of things, running water
Well,
back then?
we had a pump outside, and you had to pump the water. That I remember when we first came. My aunts would cook outside like you were camping, and I don't know how they fed 13 kids during the week, but they did.
How did they all fit in the house? How many
They
bedrooms?
did. It was a 4-bedroom, large kitchen and eating area, you know, and 1 bathroom. And of course, my uncles and my dad were all plumbers, so that was the first thing that was done, I believe. So, but there was no sheetrock, there was no heat. There was no, you know, paneling, anything like that. But we did have working, you know, we did have working water.
You didn't need heat in the summer, at least, right?
Yeah, no, we didn't.
And what kind of food did you guys make? Did you barbecue? Did you sometimes go on the beach and have picnics, or?
We did that often. The thing is that there were a lot of young children as well. So, like into the evening, when we were very young, that didn't happen. The babies, we all were at the house, and we partied in the yard, in the backyard. Everything was so open, you know. There was no place you couldn't go. The few neighbors that were around were very, very nice, and they were in awe of all the children, to be honest with you.
Right.
So we had wonderful, I have wonderful, wonderful memories of it. The old people that lived in Montauk. There were people at the association houses that were there then. And they would ride by and wave and what have you, and we were just in awe of the big houses that they lived in.
Now, for people who may not know, tell us what were the association houses?
Association houses were built in the late 1890s. They were called the Seven Sisters, and they were built primarily by Stanford White. He got most of the, not credit, but we remember his name, but it was McKinn, Mead, and Stanford. They were three architects out of New York that really came and built all of them. They were absolutely the top, and they came very wealthy people, and what they built, as lovely as they were, and really cottages were hunting lodges. And they are today owned and kept up beautifully and on the historic registry by owners today, and take great pride in them. So Montauk's very proud of that whole area.
That is really interesting. Ditch Plains has so much history there. Back then, when you were there, were they surfing back then, or did that come later?
I would say that probably started in the 60s, if my memory. I never did surf, but I have to say that the area in Ditch Plains, another infamous area today, is what we called Tent City, and it was a huge parcel, which is still there today, owned at that time by George Andrade. He was one of the heads in the early days of the Montauk Beach Company, and it was small wooden houses or shacks almost, beach cottages, and most people lived in tents. And it was an incredible happening because a lot of people that live in Montauk today or their offsprings came in those days. It was inexpensive, it was a group thing, it was, and I think it built. Today it's called the, is it the Ditch Plains?
Trailer park?
It's not really a trailer park, it's like a condominium park. Very upscale, there are homes, very expensive to own, in the millions, and to watch it from living there in the 40s to today is almost unbelievable to me.
What a difference, right?
Yes, yes.
That you've seen, that's part of the fun of living in somewhere for a long time.
Montauk.
You get to see a lot of changes. Also down around that area of Ditch Plains, tell us about Sandpiper Hill.
Sandpiper Hill is a beautiful, was a beautiful home with a windmill on the cliffs of Montauk, which is today called a part of Shadmore Reserve. But this was a residence originally built in Carl Fisher's time. I would say maybe either 27 or 28. So this was a beautiful home, and at the time I was in Montauk for the first time, the memory that I have crystal clear is that the chauffeur-driven car, black, long chauffeur-driven car, and the family being driven down Ditch Plains Road. Now, our home was at 12 Ditch Plains, which is numbered today. In those days, there was no numbers, but it was right at the beginning of the road, and we were outside playing kickball or something on the road, and stood mesmerized by seeing this chauffeur-driven car, and it was the owners at that time, which was a Sidney Rhinestein. Now, Rhinestein is that whole section of where the house does not stand today, but is still a surfing area on the ocean.
Right,
and
in
people,
Ditch
the surfers
Plains.
will say, "Oh, there was great surf at Rhinestein's," you know, or there was great surf at Cabot's. These are huge homes that live right on the water, on the cliffs, or did live.
Right.
So it was a very, very exciting kind. And these, don't forget, were kids from the Bronx that really loved where we lived then. We didn't realize that, you know, Bronx took a terrific dive in those years, and been since then, as an adult, I'm very grateful for what my mom and dad did to move here in the 50s. But at the time, it was just like we were in the movies sort of thing, you know what I mean? That we couldn't believe. And no one back home that we were friendly with could believe even where we were. They never heard of the name, nor could they believe the story about a chauffeur-driven car coming.
So your family summered here since 1947, so you were out here since age 10 in the summers, and then your family moved here year-round from the Bronx in 1953.
Yes, ma'am.
And at that time, you were what, about 16?
I think I was 14.
Yeah, around there. And then you had to go to high
no,
school.
I was 15.
15?
I'm right, yeah.
So you went to high school in East Hampton, right?
I did.
So that, just tell us, that must have been a big adjustment and also a big change from in the Bronx. You go to school and you have a life there in the city, and then you
Yes.
come out here, and then the school back then was tiny. So how was that, just as an adjustment from the big city to
Well, I
East
can
Hampton?
analyze it today only because I'm a mother and a grandmother, and but 16 is not the greatest, 15, 16 is not the greatest time to make a huge change like that. We, myself, were all excited about coming because we only came summers. We only partied at the ocean with all our cousins and relatives, and it was magical. So the adjustment was, for me, I went to an all-girl high school. There were 51 classes that would have graduated, over 500 and some odd girls. The class in East Hampton was 42, the graduating class as a senior. It took me about a month to adjust, and it's not easy in a country place, and I am very open and welcoming to anybody I meet for the first time that come, because it's hard to find a place to begin with. I did, and I loved it. The first football game and the first date I had, and then I was okay.
Right, it takes a little while for that.
Yes, yes.
So
yeah.
anyway, when you got here and you were a little bit older, back in 1951, just a few years after you had come here, a few years after you started summering here, they had a terrible accident in the ocean, and it was the Pelican accident. And you had said you had some memories of the Pelican accident?
Well, the first thing I remember very clearly is the day. I was outside pumping the water. We had a pump, an outside pump, to get the water when we first came. So yes, indeed, that was 1951, and it was a very dark, dreary, cold day. I don't remember so much wind, but I remember it being very dismal. And at the time I was out doing that, the fire whistle started to blow. And it went on and on and on. And as it turned out to be then, it was the Pelican, had capsized, turned over somewhere, I believe, the point, the lighthouse, the riptide, somewhere in that area. And that in those days, from what we understood, that the Fisherman's Special, which was called the Long Island Railroad, that came out very early in the morning from New York, and it was packed with fishermen. And they were let off the train, and at that time, all of the dock area was just opposite the train station. And the men would grab their pole and their bag and run like the hammers just to get a boat. And all of the party boats were lined up all out along the dock. And evidently, with the bad weather, the boat capsized, overcrowded. Too many people. They went to one side to prevent the big wave to get them, and that's what happened. Lost a lot of people, and it was frightful. And I can remember my dad taking me, I don't know if there was the whole carload, but we went down to the area, which sticks in my mind as clear as that pumping the water and hearing that siren, was the Montauk Yacht Club at that time was converted to a morgue. Everybody along the dock area, no matter who they were, right along all the water, converted everything. The boatmen themselves and the fishermen, there's so many stories. that they all converged on the area to try to get people and save their lives or take some that had drowned. It was an incredible horror, to be honest with you. And then we were not permitted, needless to say, to go anywhere near where the bodies and what have you were, but they had a whole sectioned area, and you just rode along, and I can remember feeling so desolate. It was the first memory for me in all the years that we came as kids that there was sadness and pain, and it was associated with really people I didn't know, but the horror of it, you know?
And that was because back then there was no rules as to how many people you could take on a party boat or any boat, actually. And the Pelican was a party boat, and they had many people. I think it was like 36 people or something. And
then as you rode around, there were people with cameras. I guess it was all the newspaper people at that time, you know. Now we're all media, but to that time, it was newspaper people that came from all over New York and everything, and it was incredible coverage. I remember that. And it was sad because the Carroll family, there were really two brothers that had two different boats. One was the Jigger and this one was the Pelican. Lived in town. They were local people. They were good, honest, hardworking fishermen, and it was a freak of nature that happened, as well as everybody overloaded their boats at the time because there was no
actual
restrictions.
rules, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the captain's name of the Pelican?
I believe it was Ed Carroll.
And Howie Carroll was his
Harry
brother.
Carroll was his brother,
Right.
and then we had a Howie Carroll that was a son that carried on the Jigger, or the Jigger 2, that I remember years later.
Right. Well, that's quite a memory. And after high school, what did you do right after high school?
After high school, I went to Manhattan. I lived with the Hallisey family in Jackson Heights. Their daughter and I were very good friends, and she had a job with Norelco Corp on 100 East 42nd Street, and I worked in the accounts payable department, which I loved with a passion. I was, again, back in the city, but in Manhattan, and taking the subway and the buses and going to lunch at the Commodore across the street and the Schrafts, you know, for people's different birthday. It was another whole kind of journey and era, so I loved it. And it was a short period of time. I remember getting a call back from my mom. Maybe I was there a year and a half. That I'm not too clear about. But she said I was offered a job in Montauk at the Montauk Lumberyard on Industrial Road, and that was owned by Mr. and Mrs. Ellis Tuttle, a family that I was very close with, their daughter Peggy and their son Craig, which we graduated together. So my mom really wanted me to come home. I was the oldest of 5, and in honesty, I hated the thoughts of coming back, but it only took a few minutes, and when I got back, and all was fine, and I loved the job that I had and the people. They were like second parents to me, to be honest with you, at the time.
And what did you do with the lumberyard?
I did estimating for that Mr. Tuttle taught me, to be honest with you, but also I did the billing and the coding of the price tickets and what have you. And took care of the customers, waited on them, did, you know, you do everything in Montauk when you have a job there.
And while you were there, you met John Lycke, your husband, and you got married in 1960 and started a family. Tell us, how did you meet your husband?
Well, he was a local that was born in Montauk, and I can remember clearly having my first really conversation with him. He came in with Frank Mundus, who he was at that time working for on his boat, and they came into the lumberyard, and we had a chat and talk and a couple of times, and then he called and asked me to go out, and we went to the play at Guildhall in East Hampton. and had something to eat and drink at the 1770 house, and I was in awe. And we kind of continued from then on, and married in February 1960.
Okay. And then you started a family. Tell us about your family.
Well, in the 60s, I had 3 children, John, my oldest, Darlene, and Karen. We bought our home, first home, in 62 on Greenwich Street. The original house was built by John Steck, who was a fisherman and a boat builder. He and his wife Edna and I became very good friends, living on the same street, to be honest with you, and also raising our children together. But getting back to me, at that time, in 1964, we moved into the Montauk Firehouse. In those early days, there was an apartment attached to the firehouse, and for their phone and security systems, they hired people to live in the cottage, free. You got paid a salary plus all free utilities and use of the house. So at that time, I had 2 children, and my 3rd child, Karen, was born while we lived at the firehouse, and it was the only time that Mrs. George said, she was the newspaper lady in the Star at the time, that the only time the whistle didn't blow at 12 o'clock was the day Karen was born, which was September 13th, 1966.
Oh, that's a great story.
And it was part of the old time. She was an older woman who did all the news. Like, we still have the Montauk column today in the East Hampton Star.
Wow.
And we had to bring somebody in to cover the phones, and that was Dick White. Well, and he missed the 12 o'clock noon whistle.
Was your husband like what did he do for a living? Did he do the security there?
Well, he was a caretaker, so he had to keep the building clean. He had to make sure everything was locked and spit and polished and what have you, and keep control of anything that went on as far as different meetings and any kind of, you had to do it. He worked during the day, and I then answered the phone. And what you did was, when you got a call that come in that was a fire alarm or an ambulance alarm, you hit the whistle and you went downstairs and you manned the radios on the main floor and opened the doors for the equipment.
Okay. And while you were married and raising a family, you took on some outside social work, and what you did was actually got involved with some community events, and you were you helped out with the Boy Scouts, or it was the Cub Scouts and the Girl Scouts.
That's
Want to
true.
tell us about your?
Yes.
You were saying that you took your Girl Scouts to Europe.
Yes. All those years when my children were growing up and going into those organizations, John, of course, was the oldest, so it was Cub Scout first, and Lynn Butler and I were co-leaders, and we took the boys to Hall Saners, and we took them to the lighthouse, and we toured, try to move out of the actual scout book. And they were great memories, and took them clamming. We took them to the candy kitchen to see how to make chocolate, and just branched within our local environment to let them know what they had and what they were living with. Then moved on to the Girl Scouts, which was from the juniors all the way through to the older girls. And I did take them 2 trips to Europe, which encompassed England, Ireland, and France. Both things. They were world jamborees, which were scouting. They call them guides in Europe, but scouts and guides from all over the world. They met scouts from Japan and Italy and you name it, and it was an incredible, incredible experience.
When you said Ireland, I just happened to realize your maiden name is McLaughlin, so it was Joan McLaughlin, and you have an Irish heritage. Maybe I should just
100%
touch on
Irish
that,
on both
which is why you're a
sides.
good storyteller.
Yes.
And so you took him to Ireland, and was that the first time you had ever been there?
First time ever.
Oh, that must have been exciting.
It was so exciting. We did bed and breakfasts. We did bus tours. We had it all organized before we left. And in honesty, we did fundraising for the girls for almost 2 years, or a year and a half, I guess it was. And we had workathons where they went to different homes and did work within the scope of what they could do, charged a few dollars, and that was credited to their account. And when we got done with a horse show that Bobby Borth put on, and different people in town, and a pancake breakfast the fire department put on, and when we got done, there was enough money for all those girls, there was maybe 12 of them, to go without a penny other than their spending money.
Wow. So with your Irish heritage, the McLaughlin family, did you look up any of the McLaughlins? Or you probably didn't have time, but have you been back to Ireland since then?
Numerous
Several times, right?
Yes, and we have found on both sides, the Finn and the Foley side, which were my mom's side, because I'm 100% on both sides. My mom's family all came from Ireland. My grandpa came in 1903, and my grandmother, Foley, they didn't meet in Ireland, they met in New York. She came in 1906. So my mom, Mary Mack, as you know her, was first generation in this country. But my grandmother died very young in childbirth, so I never knew her. But my grandfather used to take us to the St. Patrick's Day Parade, which we'll get to later. When we were kids, we got a day off from school, and he stood with his hand over his heart while every county went by, and it's a memory I have to this day, you know.
I'm sure, yeah, that's a big heritage, a little Irish, you know.
Yes.
Especially in Montauk, where there's many Irish people who came there later, but they started coming there. I distinctly remember in like the late 60s or the mid 60s, they started coming over. I love this, this whole memory about the cashier and then manager of the Montauk Playhouse movie theater in the early 60s. Around the early 60s, Montauk Playhouse movie theater was there, and you had the opportunity to work there. And tell us about that.
Well, the Montauk Beach Company had repaired what was a tennis court of Carl Fisher's that was built in 1929, and it had gone into somewhat disarray. And the Montauk Beach Company, headed by Frank Tuma, repaired it. Eddie Pospisil at the time was a contractor. He did all the work, and they opened it up for the first year because the Montauk Manor was open then, and it was a summer theater, hotel and theater, not hotel and theater, hotel and restaurant, the Montauk Manor. It was absolute lovely. And they had the summer stock theater. Sidney Sheldon at the time was a name, and he had summer stock, and we had the first, it was one and only year that it worked, but it was absolutely dynamite, and that's where the interior had like red carpet, and it had director's chairs. And this year, the first year it opened, was the Montauk Playhouse, and it was a summer theater. And Anything Goes played in that. Then that finished, and it didn't happen again after that. And then Prudential Theater, who owned all the East End theaters like East Hampton and Southampton, probably Sag Harbor, I don't know, rented Montauk Playhouse Theater for summers, some say May or June through September. And the first year, that was 1960, and it was the first year that they opened, and I was asked to be cashier. The man who was asked, Pappy Windsor, he ran all the taxis and school buses at the time, and he asked me to cashier, which I did. At that time, I was pregnant. Teresa sticks in my mind. I was pregnant with my son, John. So I loved it. It was part-time. I hired a candy girl and all this. We had a nice little official theater. But and it lasted. I worked there probably the second year I was asked to be manager, and I stayed there till about 1966. And then someone else took it over. It was very exciting. They had all kinds of first run movies. Sometimes they tried not to have it book it for a week if they could not have it when they got the film, and that's all structured by unions and what have you, which only when you work to somebody do you realize that. But anyway, what happened is that one that totally sticks in, because we needed, with people coming, you needed 2 changes in a week in order to keep the customers going. This particular year, it was Psycho, and it was something that is ingrained in my mind. And I have to say that it was 7 days a week, 2 showings, matinees, Saturday and Sunday. So of course, my office was opposite the cashier on the lower level. There's a big flight of stairs, and then you went into the theater. About halfway through the movie, I was determined that I was going to sit through that movie and watch it. I said, I can't not let it happen, and it honestly never happened. When it got to the shower scene with Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh, I got up and I went right back downstairs and stayed in my office till it was over. I never did see the film.
You never saw the whole movie. I don't blame you.
From beginning to end.
That is wild. I don't blame you at all. So you ran out. And tell us also about the ceiling. There was a problem where it was leaking on the ceiling.
Oh, what happened is that there was, I guess a lot of the repairs were patch and go. I honestly don't know. But we used to have up by the screen and what have you, because when it was made for a theater, they had the big draw screen as well, for a regular show.
Right.
So there would be, you could see the water coming down, and we had many white buckets all over in the pitch dark when the movie was on, trying to contain the water, and then you have to empty them at night.
That's quite the memory.
Yeah.
And the Playhouse was built by Carl Fisher in 1929.
Yes, that was finished in 1929, and that sort of wrapped up his big construction here, because 1929, of course, in October, was the crash, and also sometime in the spring or fall, there was a huge hurricane in Miami, and he developed all of Miami, so he had a lot of his resources there, and he was using them here to bring everything, all his dreams to fruition. And the 2 combos, and a lot of his wealthy people took to the windows and the roofs with all the money they lost in 29.
Lastly, the theater also had a smoking area. You were saying back then they all had smoking areas.
Yes,
which they
we
don't
did have. Upstairs in the rear was you had to go up a short flight of stairs, and that was the smoking section.
And who was the projectionist?
The projectionist was my dear friend, Craig Tuttle.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was there for quite a while, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, for as long as I was there, anyway, And it was a union position, and nobody in the projection union up island wanted to come to Montauk. They absolutely refused. So they bent rules. They had the men that worked the projectionists had to join the union or pay dues or some such thing as that, and they were able to work it and cover themselves.
Okay. So you were moving along from the 60s into the 70s. You were raising your family in Montauk and helping your husband with his business from home.
Yes.
You were saying. And then the 1980s were magic and tragic, according to you. And
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the magic and the tragic of the 1980s.
Indeed, they were. 1980, on the magic side, my 3 children were either in college or heading to college. And by the mid-80s, say around 85, 2 of the 3 of them were finished. And we were very, very proud and excited. It was the first really college in the family, Jesuits. So, and then in 1986, Darlene, my middle child, had just finished college, gotten a teaching job, which was almost unheard of in the 80s, in Madison, Connecticut, in a grade school. So excited. She graduated from Roger Williams College and was thrilled to death to get the call and get the job. It turned out she was there maybe 3 months. She went to get all her insurance, an exam, et cetera, and they found a lump in her breast, which turned out to be malignant. And in 1986, December of 86, Darlene passed of breast cancer.
That's very sad.
13 months from beginning to end. So there can be no more tragic than that in anybody's life,
No.
and a mother or father's particularly.
So sorry.
It was, the family was all very close. The 3 kids were as well. And it took all of us probably 5 years even to come out of the black hole, to tell you the truth, to even get over it. But and people that have gone through anything similar understand without having to hear a word of it. So with that said, I just have to take a minute now because we set up a scholarship in Darlene's name at her college at Roger Williams, which is in Bristol, Rhode Island. Still there today, active every year, and I hear from the people that receive it and what have you. And also a scholarship in her name at Madison Elementary School. Since it was 3rd grade she taught, so since then, Academy has closed, and we transferred the money from that scholarship into the East Hampton Scholarship because the people, family as well as people in the community, set up a scholarship in East Hampton High School for her, and that's been going on for 37 years,
How
each
wonderful.
and every year.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a nice tribute.
Yeah, and it keeps her name alive, and there's a healing to it all.
Right.
That other young people are being helped to go to school,
Right.
as she did. So you just do what you have to do to, ease all of it and make yourself continue, and to give back what you can.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And along those years, you also opened the Montauk laundromat, and was it in 1984?
Yeah, that was before Darlene, got sick.
With
And
your husband around?
Yes.
You 2 opened it together?
Yes.
And it was the first and only one in Montauk, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about opening that. How that was.
Well, that was really John's project. He was, at that time, just very excited to have some kind of employment that would keep him indoors. And indeed, the laundromat did. He had a garbage business and also a house washing business, which you had to go out in all kinds of weather and this and that and what have you. So that was his thrust. When it happened, he hated it with a passion. He couldn't bear to be within 4 walls, but he didn't know that until he built it. But so anyway, along with all of that, the laundromat is still under my command today. My daughter Karen and John are very involved, not steadily, but they back their mom 100% on whatever needs I might have, and it's thriving.
Oh, that's good.
Right down in downtown Montauk, so I'm very grateful for that. In 1988, John and I, good friends, but we parted our ways and divorced.
And after that, you delved into community service, you were saying.
Right.
A lot of community service came after that, too, and then passed.
Right. The thing that opened the door again for me after Darlene's passing was being asked in 1989 by Suzanne Gosman. she came into the laundromat and she asked me if I would consider going on the library board of trustee board, and explained to me what it was, what it did, what it did. I'm an avid library user, and it was one of the major things, to be honest with you, when we moved here, steady. It didn't dawn on me in the early summer years when all we did was live on the beach. But after we moved here in 1953 and had school and what have you, I was absolutely horrified that Montauk had no library. It was like unheard of. I lived in the library off of Southern Boulevard in the Bronx, where I lived. And you picked your books up, you got back, you brought them back, you did, the whole ritual. And so that turned out to be, with her asking, I said, I really have given up all my Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, the whole thing. But I was, of course, hooked, and I was very interested, so I did, and I thanked her tremendously through the years. So since 1989, I have been on the Montauk Board of Trustees, the Montauk Library, and I love every minute of it.
So you were also saying that, that when you first came here, there was just the bookmobile. And then tell us a little bit about the small little house they started, the library.
All right, this all involved library.
Before the big library started.
So what happened is that prior to a group of wonderful community people in Montauk that I was not part of at the time, but that worked toward getting a library, the bookmobile from the Suffolk County Library System came to Montauk. I believe it was once a week. It might have been every 2 weeks, but they came to the parking lot just across from the post office. And they came, and you had books. You went in, you got your books, you got a card, and then you brought them back when they came the next time. And it was like the most incredible thing that happened, that we had a bookmobile, and it was on wheels. Came in and out. That must have gone to different places that, couldn't swing a library at the time. So that was the first opening. And then a group of people got together, and however it all started, honestly, I don't know, but they set up a thing, checking with the state, trying to find out all the particulars on having a library. And they got all that together, and then they needed a place to make for a library. And in many thanks to the Montauk Community Church and the people who are members there and run that wonderful establishment, they offered the library a house which is right next door to the library. There was nice parking, it was right on the highway, it was easy accessible, for $1 a year for 10 years. And they were able to take the interior out with the understanding that when they got the house back, that they would return the 2-bedroom house to how it was before they went. And that's exactly what happened. And then the group bought property from the Beach Company, from Frank Tuma, and they got the piece across the street on the highway as well. And in 1991, the new library opened up, and it opened up on one floor. And then in the 90s, from 93 to about 97 or 98, probably 97 or 98, we fundraised to complete the lower level and the upper level, the mezzanine, without an ounce of money from the taxpayer. We fundraised and state grants and completed the building as you know it today on 3 levels. So that was, the 90s were incredible. There was fundraising all over, and it was joyful because with everything that was done, the people in the community that never had a library, they were intelligent people, they were hardworking people, but if you never miss what you don't have,
Right.
And once they came and they saw the library and they did things inside, and they were able to become excited about what was here and see it. The patrons list blew and
Wow.
grew and
Wow.
grew.
Wow. And the president at the time of the library was Suzanne Gosman.
Yes,
And you got on the board, filling in the term of Betty Duryea.
yes. She
Okay.
had it was, how they say it was the unexpired term of Betty Duryea.
And today you're celebrating 30 years on the library board, and you're now president. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. So speaking of the library really quick, there's been some movement there to have in the new plans to have a fishing center, and I know you're involved with the fishermen a lot. You support them, and tell us how you feel about that aspect of it.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited about the whole new plan that we are doing major renovations in the interior of the building. In the last 20, 25 years, the needs of the library and the needs for reference books and all of the things, encyclopedias and all of the stuff and doctor manuals that were all in these big tomes that you kept on the shelves and you could have for I don't know how many years. All of that is unnecessary today. We need tables, we need a computer that you can look up whatever you want, instant, and get your information. And the children's room is like a closet that we have now, and of course we had none at all before, so we were thrilled to death to have it, and we did everything we could, and we utilized the downstairs, but lots of times there was conflicts between the adults and that, just trying to schedule. It's bursting at its seams on the initial building, and that is one big facet and very exciting for me to be complete. And we're going to have a huge children's area, which we need. When you look at the statistics of the programming and the involvement now, we've come full circle in the library and the usage and the people with adults. We had mastered adults a good 10 years ago, if not more before. People come from Amagansett and all over for our programming. But the children's program, because of our limited space, could not fly as we wanted to, and it is now.
Good.
You know, wonderful.
That's great.
So the big thing is then, along with that, we're going out with an expansion, and this is for the History and Fishermen's Center, which is about 1,600 square feet on 2 levels, lower as well as up, and this will have the history of the fishing industry as well as any ancient history or any history that we have that needs to be seen, needs to be looked at, needs to be felt, with a lot of interactive technology that we have today and hands-on, and it's so exciting that I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but I can't begin to tell you that how excited I am to be on the board and to be part of this and to get this last phase finished. And
Montauk is the biggest port on Long Island.
Yes, and you know what?
And one of the biggest ports on the East Coast, so it's a chance to...
The fishermen could meet, they could congregate there, they could have dialogue, they could bring someone in to speak.
Right.
You know what I mean? And anything like the hurricanes from '38 or past or stuff like that, we take a topic on and people can see it, delve into all that it is.
They can have photographs.
It's very exciting. And our
things.
archivist that we have staffed today, Maura Feeney, is absolutely incredible. She's one of a kind in the sense that she understands it all and really wants to, if we're going to put photos of dirigibles on from World War I, we would like to set up a dirigible so people could walk through it and know what it felt like. So that to me is like beyond exciting.
That's great. Well, you've done so many different things in your public service and work and everything. Like, I was wondering if there's anybody in Montauk that's inspired you the most, people in Montauk that you see doing other things that maybe inspire you?
Well, I have to say there are many people that I'm in awe of. I'm particularly in awe, and I don't know that I could name in the past, and she's gone, is Suzanne Gosman,
Right.
and that's my connection with the library. This girl ran a landscaping business, had 2 children, had huge staff, and she also gave 24/7 to the library in the early days before there was anything to look back on and sort of carve the path. She carved it, and she did an incredible job. Her love, and she and I did the newsletter together, and what I learned and how we would spend after work, both of us working 8 and 9, 10 hours, and we would meet in her basement, and we would work on the newsletter for the library and put it out, and I would be just energized. So she, in memory, there'll be nobody that'll take her place in my mind or fill her shoes, to be honest with you. And we have named the community room on the lower level Suzanne Gosman room, and that's in honor of her, and rightly so.
Oh, that's really nice.
And other people that stick in my mind, and I can't name, are people who commit themselves to an organization, a pride, a thought, whether it's the MVA, whether it's the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts, or any organization, that they take the time. The Montauk Playhouse Community Center was a love of mine beyond belief, and I was president for 11 years there. And with that, it took all that kind of responsibility, and within up till 2006, we were able to preserve that building. People wanted to, knock it down. So I'm not talking about me necessarily, but like Chip Duryea is president of that now. Lisa DeViglio is president as well after I was done. And it's the commitment you need to be able to complete a job. And it's a lot of volunteering, self-discipline, and getting that done besides supporting yourself somewhere else
I
to
know.
make a living.
It's unbelievable
Yeah.
that people are able to do that. Well, you've certainly done a lot, and also we want to get into talking more about the Montauk Playhouse. We'll have to do a part 2 with you, Joan Lycke, today, because we're running out of time, and you got a lot of other things that you were involved in, which we can get into in part 2. And so anyway, this is our oral history here with Joan Lycke. And so have you been happy? Just my last question, that you've been able to accomplish all the things you've been able to accomplish?
I have, but you don't do it alone. I've taken a lot of accolades, a Woman of the Year, this and that, but you don't do it alone. You do it with people behind you. Somebody has to take the top seat. I understand that, but you have to. It's the people behind you that make it a success, not just yourself.
Okay. And this is Debbie Tuma, and we've enjoyed talking to Joan Lycke today of all the Montauk Library and the Playhouse and the Montauk Laundromat, and we'll be catching up with her when we do our show the next time. And thank you so much for joining us at LTV Studios in East Hampton.
Debbie, thank you a million. It was wonderful.
I can tell you're Irish from all the stories that you tell. And
how I go on and on. I need to.
no, it's great. It's great.